Kia ora, welcome to Under the Checkered Flag, MotoGP edition. I'm your host Kate, and we're just going to jump right in. Today I am talking about testing. So we were at Sepang for, I suppose, the second start of the season. We had the shakedown, which I have already recorded a podcast about and you can go and listen to. But today it was the testing. And we had all of the riders on track, bar Franco Morbidelli. Franco suffered a head injury at Portimao, where he was training with the majority of the other Ducati guys. They do this every year, where they just do like this pre-season meet-up. They thrash around on some regular Ducatis, sort of to get themselves warmed up for the start of the year. My dog is right beside me, and if I do sound different today, I am house sitting for my parents. By the time this goes out, I will be back at my house, but for now, I'm just at my parents looking after my dog and their dog. But Frankie Morbidelli had to miss the test. It was reported that he is suffering from a severe concussion, and there was actually a blood clot in his brain. So we still wish Frankie well, and hopefully he is ready for Qatar, because that is not far away. The testing or the racing, it's officially less than a month until they are back on track, and I am ridiculously excited. Unfortunately, Frankie wasn't the only one who ended up missing the test. So Raul Fernandez from Aprilia went out. The very first lap, he seemed to hit some dirty track. He crashed out. Pecco Bagnaia also crashed out. Fortunately for Pecco, he was fine. Unfortunately for Raul Fernandez, he did suffer what sounds like quite a nasty high side, and he does have pelvic bruising. His Instagram does also state that he suffered some small fractures in his hip. So naturally, that sort of injury, it's go rest and recover, and hopefully he will also be fit for Qatar. Which is just so bizarre. It's the very first, track action of the season for the majority of these guys, and we've already got 2 riders down for injury. Given the attrition rates from last year, I'm hoping this is just an anomaly, so to speak, and we will have a lot less injuries this year. Realistically, this is MotoGP, and it's a risky sport, so I do think we will see some, hopefully a lot less than last year. So where to start with the testing? I think we should start by talking about Aprilia. Now, these guys came with aerodynamic upgrades that seem quite major. So their tail is completely different. As always, if you're watching the video version of this, I will throw some pictures up on screen. I'm going to do my best to describe it. So it looks like a normal motorbike tail, except it's got sort of wings that scoop up from the side and get pointy towards the end. It's nicknamed the Batmobile, but we saw all of the riders out on this new aero, so something must be suitable. We did see the 3 riders that remained on track, which was Aleix Espargaro, Maverick Vinales, and Miguel Oliveira, all go out together. And they were following each other at one point, so I have no doubt that they will be testing what the air is like behind each other to see how that dirty air really affects the other riders. With these tyre pressure rules coming in with disqualification, it's going to be very important to have that sort of data. One thing also I should mention when it comes to Aprilia is Miguel Oliveira was seen sporting an aero rake. So these are, basically they look like antennas, and they're just filled with sensors. And these sensors just help the guys who are designing it double check that it's doing what they think it's going to be doing, that the air is disrupted and dispersed in the way that they are expecting. So it just sort of serves as confirmation. It gives them even more data. With the 8 Ducatis on the grid sharing all their data, any advantage is going to be wanted by anyone. So aero rakes, we've seen them in Formula 1 for years, but I think we're going to start seeing more of this sort of innovation coming into the MotoGP grid. Aprilia, only Aleix Espargaro seemed to gel with the Aprilia. Even Maverick Vinales, our testing champion, was down, I believe, in 12th position, which I think is a little bit of a worrying sign because, like I said, Aleix gelled with it. He came in P5, disrupting the Ducatis at the front, but Miguel and Maverick didn't seem to connect with it so quickly. Hopefully they show some more promise in Qatar because I would love to see more manufacturers up there fighting with the Ducatis. So let's move on to Ducati, actually. I'm worried. I am very, very, very worried. So Ducati were hyping up this new engine all season, and they've had reason to. It looks impressive, and the factory riders are happy. This has me very worried. They already were so far ahead, and now they've gained another 0.8 of a second. That bike is just magnificent, and I'm so excited to see what it can do throughout the season. But with it being so far ahead, this meant we had Pecco Bagnaia in P1, demolishing the lap record, although it is an unofficial lap record. We saw 3 riders on the new Ducati, 3 riders on the new Ducati, 1 rider on the old Ducati break into the 156s. So the first was Pecco Bagnaia, the second was Jorge Martin, third Enea Bastianini, and fourth Alex Marquez. Now, I'm quite excited for the Beast. Hopefully this is the turning point for his factory Ducati career, I suppose, because last year was not an accurate description because he was injured for so much of the season. It was just not great for him. That plus the fact he wasn't gelling so well with his crew, I think it's just harsh to judge him based on that season, and I'm really hoping that he has a much stronger season this season. I said season a lot there, didn't I? And I hope he's up there fighting for the championship this year. Up there with the likes of Pecco Bagnaia and Jorge Martin, because they looked so strong this weekend. Actually, it wasn't even a weekend. It's a midweek test, which always sort of throws me off because I then just get slightly disorientated throughout my week. But alas, it was a weekday, and Pecco Bagnaia and Jorge Martin did look super, super strong, along with Enea Bastianini. Alex Marquez also looked really strong, but he's on that year-old Ducati, and I think given the fact that these factory ones look so strong, I think Pecco Bagnaia is going to be getting his wish, and we're going to see a bigger gap in the field this year for the factory Ducatis and the satellite Ducatis. So let's talk about the other Gresini Ducati rider. That is obviously one of the biggest talking points currently, and that's Marc Marquez. Now, he ended up, I believe it was P6, possibly it was in the top 10. This has got to be a really, really happy moment for him because on day 1 of the test, it looked like it was an absolute disaster, mainly because he suffered significantly from 4 technical issues, which ruled him out for large portions of the day. And having that many technical issues, you don't really expect it from a Ducati, but you've got to remember these bikes have been absolutely thrashed for a year already. So things are going to naturally start to break and things like that. So he suffered these 4 technical issues. Then he has to, use the rest of that day just to get feeling on the bike. It's going to take him a while because he's come from riding a Honda where you try and put all the trust and all the focus goes on the front end in a Honda, whereas it is the complete opposite on a Ducati, so it's gonna take him a while to get up to speed. That being said, the day 2 and day 3, he really turned it up a notch and seemed to show up, basically. Very, very impressive performance from Marc Marquez. I do think that we are gonna see him collect some wins this year. Whether he'll be fighting for the championship, I personally do think so, but I do not think he's going to win the championship. As I said just before, I think the gaps between the satellite Ducatis, and the factory Ducatis will be much bigger this year. Moving over to the final Ducati garage, VR46. Possibly who I'd consider the biggest winner of this test. Actually, the second biggest winner of this test. It's Fabio Di Giannantonio. He looked so strong. He put in a sprint simulation that just showed that he's still gelling with that bike. He's doing well, and I think this season we can see some really good results from him again. And I do hope it stays that way, and I do hope that we can continue to see Digia in MotoGP. He was sort of saved at the last hour, I suppose, by his really strong end-of-season performance last year. I just hope with it swapping to a team, with his new crew chief, I hope he continues to keep gelling. Unfortunately, though, across the garage from him, Marco Bezzecchi seemed to have a bit of a disaster. So he just wasn't there on pace at all. So I think he's going to be coming into Qatar on the back foot a little bit, but I'm sure he'll get up to speed quite quickly. We know he's an incredibly talented rider. So overall, not too worried, but a little bit underwhelmed by Bezzecchi's performance. The final European manufacturer at testing was KTM. Now they seem to have a test of two halves. You had Brad Binder and Pedro Acosta, who I will be coming back to very shortly. We had them doing well. On the other side, we had Jack Miller and Augusto Fernandez doing average for Miller, really not great for Augusto Fernandez. Now, if I was Augusto Fernandez, I'd be a little bit worried because we know he does not seem to have that qualifying pace. He's not great over a single lap. Last season, we saw him put in some really, really solid performances. Those performances were basically doing what Brad does, being a Sunday man and pushing his way through the field. This best result he got was a P4 in Le Mans last year, and he is an incredibly talented rider and an incredibly intelligent rider as well. But he is going to need to bring that into a single lap pace if he wants to compete this year, because across the garage from him now is Pedro Acosta, and my gosh, Paco, my dude, I knew you were talented. We all probably know, if you've been watching Pedro's career from Moto3, we know that this kid has insane skill. But my gosh, even I didn't expect him to adapt this quickly. And Aleix Espargaro summed it up well in an interview. He said along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something like, you look at the lines that Pedro is taking, and he's taking it like a veteran, not like a rookie. And that does sum it up. We saw it at the Valencia test. We saw that absolutely banging shot of Pedro Acosta sliding those Michelin rear tires. It was honestly incredible from a rookie. You just don't really see that adaptation often. And I know he doesn't like to be compared to Marc Marquez because everyone's calling him the next Marc Marquez. And we did see this great interview which shows what a character he is, in the fact that when they asked him, what does it feel like to be called the next Marc Marquez? He says, I don't want to be the next Marc Marquez. I want to be the first Pedro Acosta. And I think that is exactly the personality that MotoGP needs at the moment. We need someone like Pedro to come in and shake things up. Get up there at the front, him and Brad together, battling those Ducatis at the front. We both know they're a bit more aggressive. Rubbing is racing kind of characters. And I think that this is a really great possibility for them. With all this talk about Marc Marquez's future, whether he's going to be staying at Ducati and moving into the factory team, whether he's going to be moving back to Honda, the third one in the mix is possibly he's that person to win KTM a world championship. And I was all aboard that train because the sponsorship lines up. It does make sense. I could easily see Marc Marquez going to KTM. But the simple fact is, and I suppose this is what woke me up to it, was this test, they're not going to need Marc Marquez. Not if Pedro Acosta keeps this up. Not if he adapts as well as he does. All due respect to Brad Binder, and I have a huge amount of respect for Brad. He's one of my favourite racers. If he doesn't, fight up the front this year, I think this is Brad's year to fight for the championship. I think this year, hopefully next year as well. But if he can't do it by then, I think Pedro Acosta is going to be the guy to do it. He's got it. He really does have it. He's got that natural talent, that instinct, that natural ability to just be a world champion. He's already a Moto3 and Moto2 world champion. I do think Pedro Acosta is going to be a MotoGP world champion soon. I don't think it's going to happen this year. The grid's too close together. We've got so many good bikes on the grid at the moment. It's not like 2013 when Marc Marquez came in and won a championship in his rookie year. I don't think he's going to be able to do that. If he does, I will be thoroughly impressed. And I'll be genuinely over the moon for him because, like I said, he's such a character. I think he's just what MotoGP needs. And I'm so keen to have a KTM take that top spot, a KTM World Championship. I would absolutely adore it. So that's it for the European manufacturers. Let's look over to the ones in concession row D, the Japanese manufacturers, Yamaha and Honda. Yamaha's changes look like they're more in the garage than on the bike. We did see some aerodynamic and engine upgrades from Yamaha. They do seem like they've made some steps forward. Quartararo, who is obviously extremely vocal when he's unhappy, was quite reserved, so I think that's quite a good sign. I do hope Yamaha move forward quite significantly, because I think now they've got arguably, what I'd consider at least, the best rider lineup on the grid in terms of Fabio Quartararo and Alex Rins. Alex Rins is an incredible talent at developing a bike. He's probably the biggest loss from Honda from last year. Yes, I know Marc Marquez's loss was significant, I suppose, but I think Alex Rins would have done a lot more for them in terms of development in the long run. So I think they've got the lineup. Now they've shaken up the garage. What they've done is they've hired some other engineers, some more development guys, and they're really starting to ramp that project up. I think while they do still have the hindrance of having only 2 bikes on the grid, it's not as much data as the rest of the grid. But this is a really solid starting point. With these concessions, with them having the ability to have Cal test a lot, we could really start to see some major improvements happening. And provided the factory listen to their new engineers, who we do have to say, they're not Japanese, they are European. So provided they can, work together, even with the difference in cultures, we should be seeing Yamaha moving forward significantly. They were no way near as far behind as Honda, so hopefully we'll get to see them binding up the front a lot quicker. That being said, Honda have thrown everything and the kitchen sink at this project. They've come with basically an entirely new bike. They do have the one from the Valencia test, which looked totally different. The 2023 bike basically doesn't exist anymore. They've just completely thrown everything into creating a new bike, new upgrades. The aero is now built into the bike rather than just being bolted on, which we saw quite a lot last season and the season before. And while Yamaha's progress seems to be more subtle, a bit more sheltered, Honda are clearly out in the open, throwing so much at this project. They have booked a test at every single race weekend. Not only that, the biggest shift is arguably the fact that LCR have sort of now got the same arrangement that Pramac have to Ducati. So they're basically a factory. So they're basically testing all the parts that the factory guys are testing too. It's much more of an equal partnership. It's the partnership that if Honda had with LCR last year, then Alex Rins would have stayed because he would have been listened to. This is a really, really exciting development for me. I'm a massive LCR fan. Fingers crossed that this, plus all their testing, with these new concessions, the fact that they have an incredibly strong rider lineup with Johann Zarco, Taka Nakagami, Luca Marini, and Joan Mir, fingers crossed that this really, really does push them forward into development. I do have to wonder a little bit about whether there's a little extra reason that Honda are partnering so much more factory support with LCR, and that is the fact that we have several satellite teams up for renewal this year. Really quickly, if you don't know how it works, we have factory teams who are direct from the factory. They're the manufacturers, for example, Honda, Yamaha, KTM. Then you have satellite teams, so these work in partnership, sort of, with the factories. So these are usually one-year-old bikes. However, we do seem to be moving away from that quite a bit. So you've got Gas, who are KTM satellite team. I don't think they're going to go anywhere, especially now that they do also seem to be in a similar arrangement to Pramac. That same factory level support seems to be there a little bit. That's arguably, these are like factory levelish teams, but they're not the factory team. So they get really huge amount of support and they're doing all the testing, but they're not the factory team, which is where generally you earn more money, you're getting all of the support. You'd get probably 95% of the support or 90% of the support if you're at this primary satellite team. Then you have the other satellite teams like Gresini and VR46 who are just on last year's model. So several of these teams are up for renewal. As far as I'm aware, VR46 is one of them. They are saying they want to renew with Ducati, and they absolutely do, or would be silly if they did not renew with Ducati, but they are also probably the one that is most likely to switch. Where would they switch? Yamaha. Valentino Rossi owns this team. He's got a great partnership with Yamaha. He's an ambassador for Yamaha. If a team's going to switch, I think it's going to be VR46. LCR, I don't think will go, especially now that they're in such close partnership with Honda and they've had a strong relationship with Honda for such a long period of time. We do know that KTM did come knocking for LCR though, so I did wonder if that could be one of the little reasons that Honda is deciding to lean so heavily now on LCR and bring them truly into the fold in a way that they haven't been before. Could be one of the reasons. I am just merely speculating here. So those three teams I know for sure are up for renewal. So that's Gas, who, like I said, considering KTM were after another satellite team, I do not think Gas is going anywhere. Same with LCR, I don't think they're going anywhere. So the wild card, I suppose, is VR46. As far as I'm aware, actually, Pramac may also be up, but Pramac and Ducati, given the fact that they were fighting for the championship last year, and that will have done absolute wonders for their marketability. Wow, I can really not speak today. But it would have done wonders for them. I can't see them going anywhere. So all eyes will be on VR46 and whether they sign or not. It's sort of like this separate silly season to the rider silly season that we are going to have and I'm ridiculously excited for it all. Next week on the show, Pozza and I will be talking about our livery ratings, and we are also gearing up to do our prediction podcast, which we will come to at the end of the year to see how well we did. Yes, I say how well we did as if we wouldn't be failing spectacularly and getting it all wrong. There's only one way to find out, and that is to tune in next week. As always, like and subscribe if you're, enjoying this. If you're coming around often, it really does help the channel grow. And thank you all so much for being here, and I hope you all have a wonderful week.